Don't watch, just listen. The club's van, detailed with a cartoon ghost and the word skeptic above it, pulls up to the old Victorian-style mansion. The curtains appear to have been torn up, either from age or ripped by hand. With mannequins leaning against the windows, the mansion appears all too perfect for some horror movie to be shot at it. James, the first to get out, is a tall, semi-muscular Rastafarian, wearing a dark gray jacket and camouflage cargo pants. Helen, like her twin, is tall and wearing a dark gray jacket. Both of them have dark brown eyes and long black hair, James preferring to wear his as dreadlocks, while Helen wears hers in a ponytail. Jack and Sarah gather their things inside the van. Sarah was looking at the different mannequins, wondering if any of them would move. Her deep red hair and green eyes took attention away from how short she really was. She wore a big brown jacket, which turns into a trench coat on her. Jack is average height, which meant he was as tall as Helen. His light blue eyes were mystifying to many, if not everyone they met. He wore a dark black leather jacket and had short black hair. "What's with the mannequins?" James asks in a slight Rastafarian accent. Getting out of the van, Helen says, "Yeah, was it a clothing store or someone trying to fake us out?" She grabs the camera bag from the seat, throwing the strap over her shoulder as she closes the door. Jack and Sarah slam their doors as they get out of the van. Jack, holding a laptop with a club emblem on it, moves around the van to get a better look at the house. Sarah, already taking photographs, was getting more and more excited as she moves closer to the house. Jack looks back at the two siblings. "Quit complaining. The college got a large grant for this," Jack says, checking to see if his phone was charged. "I guess our mascot is right," Helen says, reaching back into the van to grab her notebook. James grabs a large box filled with security cameras and follows after Jack. Jack, not wanting Sarah to get lost in the building, follows after her. The squeak of the floorboards, accompanied by the door's rusty hinges, only added to the house's charm as they open the door and walk inside. The first thing to greet them inside the house is a mannequin, again, cliché for a horror movie, and appearing too new for the rest of the house. Decorating the room is a small table with a chipped vase behind the mannequin, a door to the left of the entrance, and an open archway leading into the dining room to the right, with some mannequins set up look out of the dining room windows, and a stairway behind the small table. "Okay, someone is setting up these things," James says, carefully walking around the mannequin. "I think the dining room is a perfect spot for our base camp," Helen says, already walking through the archway. Sarah hasn't stopped taking pictures, though she is more carefully moving around as she glances down at the floorboards each time they squeak. Jack hasn't moved from his spot since he entered into the halls, his eyes darting from place to place, letting his mind wander as he wonders what exactly happened here. "What is it?" James asks. The group stopped as they notice Jack not breaking the threshold of the doorway. Jack realizes that he has put the investigation to a standstill and sighs. "Could you all stop that?" Jack says, walking into the house as he moves for the dining room. "You're the one making us do that," Helen says, blocking her eyes from the flash of the camera. Jack sighs as he glances back at Sarah, already getting ready to take another picture. "I was only thinking," he says, setting up the laptop on the antique dining room table. James sets the box onto the table as well, after moving one of the 6 chairs around it. "Well, stop looking or like you're seeing something every time you think," James says, having a hard time with how short the archway is, as he ducks down to walk back through with the camera. "Let's just get the camera set up for tonight and stop thinking about the guy standing behind you," Jack says, looking at James. When James turns around to check, Jack snickers to himself. "That's not funny coming from you, Jack," he says, getting a laugh from everyone as they set up for the night. Some time passes and the group finishes setting up. Finding the door to the left of the first room in the house is a bathroom, the kitchen attached to the dining room, and 3 bedrooms upstairs. A door hidden by the stairway reveals a basement, empty and abandoned. Jack checks his phone around 11 p.m. "All right, I'd say we can get this party started," he says. "Who's taking the first shift?" Helen asks, already sitting at the computer. "Are you asking or telling us?" Jack asks. "You know me too well," she says, letting out a sinister smile. A sigh escapes from Jack's mouth before he glances at the rest of them. "We'll rotate into teams of 2. Me and James will go out first," he announces. "Why can't I go first?" Sarah asks. "Would you want to go with Jack first?" James questions. "That's not... I mean, just go." She doesn't try to argue with James, though the group knew why she wanted to be alone with Jack. Jack smirks at Sarah before looking at Helen. "We'll see you in an hour," he says, grabbing a flashlight and holding his phone in his pocket. James follows behind Jack, holding his cell phone like a camera. The 2 leave the girls alone as they journey upstairs. The squeak of the stairs is the only thing to break the silence in the house as they reach the upstairs hallway. 2 doors on the left, and a turn in the hallway leading to another door. In the middle of the hallway is an attic door and the tripod with the security camera on it. "So is there any ghost here?" James asks. Jack sighs. "There's ghosts everywhere," Jack says, feeling worried. "You mean this place is that haunted?" James asks. "No, I mean wherever you go, there are ghosts. It doesn't matter what location you go to, there are ghosts in that location," Jack says. "It doesn't mean it's haunted in the sense we're used to. It just means someone died there at some point in history." "Oh, so you see ghosts here?" James asks, already looking around for something unusual. "No," Jack says. "No?" James responds. "No, nothing," he says, already worried. "So what does that mean?" James asks. Jack stops near the camera, aiming the flashlight around the hallway. "I'll get back to you on that," he says, hoping he's wrong, and they're just hiding. James is now a little worried, though he still follows Jack. "So have you asked Sarah out yet?" he asks. "Really, James?" Jack asks. "What? I'm just curious if you and Sarah have actually tried going out yet," he says. "And I'm fairly certain that we're being recorded right now," Jack says, gesturing toward the security camera. "I was hoping you've forgotten," James says. Not acknowledging James for the moment, Jack notices an odd symbol on the wall, a crude star carved into the wood with some almost Viking-looking runes in the corners. Jack hadn't seen anything like that before, but James had. Noticing James's behavior, Jack glances in his direction before noticing a tapping sound coming from down the hallway. When he sees James react as well, Jack turns his flashlight toward that direction. "Well, either a rat," Jack says, "or something trying to get our attention," James adds, pulling out a Jewish star necklace, adorned with multiple feathers, chicken feet, and some things Jack doesn't want to know what they are. "Doesn't that sort of defeat the first commandment?" Jack questions. "Sometimes you need the Jewish God to deal with it," James says, following after Jack as they approach the end of the hallway. The deafening silence is only broken by the creak of the floorboards, the darkness surrounding their flashlights getting darker as they get closer to the end of the hallway. Jack searches the surroundings as best as he can, while James speaks in French. Although Jack can't speak it, he knows that James is praying. The tapping happening again, and James moving closer, now a lot more confident. Before they can reach the end of the hallway, a scream from downstairs catches both of their attention. Some of the worst situations go through Jack's mind, and he rushes back down, caring little if James is following after. The hallway is a blur as the pounding of Jack's feet echo throughout the open room. Jack quickly descends the stairs, rushing toward the dining room. As Jack arrives, he sees what he would expect to see when he arrives. Sarah taking pictures of falling bookcase, and Helen writing down notes. What Jack didn't expect was the little girl standing behind the bookcase, staring at Helen and Sarah. Jack holds onto his cell phone, not pulling it out just yet, as he approaches Sarah and Helen. "What happened?" Jack asks, keeping one eye on the girl. "The bookcase fell," Helen says. "Maybe something pushed it." Sarah barely contains her excitement. Now, we don't know yet." Helen looks back at Jack. "Jack couldn't see any ghosts here yet, and so we don't know if there is anything here." Jack shines his flashlight in the direction of the bookcase, making sure the little girl is in full view of the others. "Was there anything that you two noticed when it fell?" he asks, hearing James arrive in the room. "There's nothing at the end of the hallway," James says, "or at least nothing I could have noticed." "We couldn't see anything either," Sarah says. Jack pays attention to everyone's reactions, his light clearly still shining on the girl. From what Jack can see, the girl is wearing a white dress, has shoulder-length black hair, and green eyes. "Does that mean that there's nothing here?" Sarah's disappointed question has her stop taking pictures, as Helen's notes more of the surrounding area. Jack looks at James, whom slowly tries to put away the charm before Jack stops him. Although having such a mix of cultures on one charm does make Jack a little nervous, he isn't sure if the little girl is malicious or benevolent. "Jack," James questions, already scanning the room for something only Jack can see at the moment. Jack's sigh as he pulls out his cell phone is one of frustration. The recording app on the phone and Jack's walk toward the bookshelf are observed by the others with a mix of caution and joy. Jack leans down to look at the little girl in the eye, and stares at Jack with a mix of curiosity and confusion. "What's your name?" Jack's voice lifts up as he smiles, talking to the child as warmly as he can. "Who is—" Sarah's excitement is quickly contained as Jack glances back at her. As Jack turns his attention back to the little girl, her curiosity turns toward the others as James grabs his own cell phone and begins to record, while Helen sits next to Jack and begins to take notes. Sarah only stares at Jack, in awe of his ability to see the unseen. The little girl looks back at Jack. "What are you doing?" Her question is somewhat threatening to Jack, but now that she is talking to him, he continues smiling as warmly as possible. "We're just trying to get to know you," Jack says. "You must be lonely here." He glances at Helen, whom has been writing all of his questions down. "How long have you been here?" "Are you going to help me, mister?" she asks, appearing excited. "What's the matter?" Jack asks, seeing that the girl is beginning to open up. "They won't let me leave. They're keeping me here," she says. "Who is?" Jack's question is cut off as the little girl runs from them. "Wait!" Jack chases the girl, but stops when he finds her staring at a mark above the kitchen door. It's the same mark that Jack and James saw before, carved into the wood of the door and painted red. Jack looks at the girl and sees her glance back at him, slightly pained by its presence. James follows after Jack with the girls leaning into the kitchen. Sarah is still taking photos. "What is it?" James asks. "She's trapped here," Jack says, gesturing toward the mark on the door, though I don't know why. "Who is trapped?" Helen asks, walking into the room. "A little girl," Jack says. "She hasn't yet told me her name." Jack is starting to feel troubled by this, though Sarah breaks his thought process. "Well, if she's trapped, we should free her," Sarah says, moving toward the mark on the door. "Sarah, wait!" Before James can stop her, she was already cutting into the mark. The house shook, and the mark glowed for a moment before everything stopped. The room was silent. Sarah looks around, seeing James and Helen just as confused as her. Jack was standing as still as he could. "Was that it?" Sarah asks. "What?" Jack shoots a warning glance at her when she meets his eyes, and can see he is as pale as a sheet. "Jack?" "Nobody move," Jack utters, glancing at Helen and James to make sure they were complying. It was a moment he was glad they couldn't see what he could see, because he wasn't sure what he was looking at. Forming from the wall was something with 4 arms. No, not forming from the wall, pulling itself from it. The glowing yellow eyes and the elongated neck first come out as the thing stretches out to reveal its easily 10-foot height. The mouth opens up, taking up most of its face as it lets out a low rumble that actually shook the house. The others now knew to stand perfectly still as its legs come out of whatever place it came from. The odd, bent backward legs that look more at home on an animal than anything standing on two legs. The head stretches around the room, first passing by Sarah, causing a chill to travel up her spine. The creature acts like it has weight behind it, moving around James, then stopping as he stood there, feeling the presence of this thing, moving its 3-foot-long neck down to look at him in the eye. The others didn't know what was going on, but they could see Jack shivering in place, staring into the void of this thing's eyes. As it turns to look around the room, it settles on the spot where the little girl once stood. A low grumble comes from its throat, affecting the room as it walks past Jack, then past Helen. Once the creature has left the room, Jack lets himself breathe again, feeling like years were taken from his life. Waiting for the tension in the room to settle, Sarah asks, "What happened, Jack?" Jack looks for the little girl and sees that she is no longer there. "I think we should leave," Jack says. "What about?" James stops when the house vibrates with a low, booming crack. A mix of sounds, images, and emotions enter into everyone's heads as the house looks normal, then decays. They feel angry, sad, frustration. Then nothing as the images go to some frat boy's corpses laying at their feet in some basement. Then they appear back in the kitchen again. "You know what? I think we have enough of what we need. We could pick it back up in the morning," James says, as the four of them rush out of the house, feeling the place vibrate behind them. Jack begins to wonder exactly what they had let out, and if it is still going to be at the house when they come back.